Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking something that is, well, honestly, it's a little bit unsettling, but absolutely fascinating. We're getting right into the mind of the 17th century philosopher Thomas Hobbes. We're going to look at his rather brilliant diagnosis of the human machine and try to figure out exactly why we behave the way we do. Okay, so picture this. It's an incredibly common scenario today. You've got someone with a great job, a nice house, solid savings. By all logical measures, they should be perfectly content, right? But instead, they're staring at their bank statement with this anxious, burning urge to just acquire more. You know the feeling. Why does this happen? Why on earth do we constantly want more, even when our present needs are completely met?
Well, Thomas Hobbes actually tackled this exact question way back in 1651 in his masterpiece Leviathan. And he introduced this foundational idea that is the absolute core of our analysis today. Quote, "Man's life is a perpetual and restless desire of power after power that ceaseth only in death." Listen to that phrasing, perpetual, restless, ceasing only in death. It's a huge claim. Basically, he's suggesting there is literally no finish line where we can finally just sit back and say, okay, I have enough.
Now, to really grasp this, we've got to look at how Hobbes actually defines the word power. Because usually we hear that and think of, a king ruling a country or a CEO running a massive company. But Hobbes defines it much more broadly. For him, power is the present means to obtain some future apparent good. It's basically any resource that helps you secure a better tomorrow. Your savings account, your reputation, your intellect, even your friends. Hobbes says they're all just forms of power we accumulate to protect our future.
This brings us to part one, the engines of endless desire, security and glory. Let's dive in. So what exactly is driving this endless accumulation? Well, Hobbes outlines two main psychological engines that keep us stuck on this infinite treadmill. The primary driver is security, which is rooted in what he calls diffidence or fear. And the secondary driver is glory, which is all about status and comparison. Let's break these down a bit. Starting with the primary driver, security, Hobbes argues that we relentlessly pursue power not because we're chasing some intense pleasure, but actually out of fear. We are absolutely terrified of losing the comforts we already have. Because the future is just so totally uncertain, we endlessly hoard resources today to protect ourselves. Think about people panic buying toilet paper during a crisis. In Hobbes's mechanical view of human nature, that's not greed. That is literally just humanity terrified of an unpredictable future.
Then you've got the secondary driver, which is glory. And this is where status anxiety really kicks in. We are fiercely competitive creatures, right? We might have everything we need to survive, but the second a neighbor gets a bigger house or a shinier car, we suddenly feel compelled to acquire more ourselves. Not for survival, but just so we don't fall behind in the social hierarchy. It's all driven by that smug pride of competition. And that perfectly sets up Hobbes's fascinating definition of happiness, or what he calls felicity. We normally think of happiness as a peaceful, resting state. You finally made it, right? Nope. Hobbes sees felicity as a continual progress. Think about it. You desire an object, you attain it, and instantly your desire just pivots to the next object. Getting that first thing is just a stepping stone to wanting the next thing. The cycle literally never breaks.
Moving on to the next section. The state of nature and value-neutral science. So if every single one of us is running on this endless treadmill for power, what happens when we all inevitably bump into each other? Well, it leads straight into the absolute chaos of the state of nature. Hobbes identifies three main causes of quarrel here: competition for gain, diffidence or fear for safety, and glory for reputation. Since everyone is restlessly stockpiling power to secure their own future, conflict is pretty much inevitable. And this is exactly why Hobbes argues we so desperately need a sovereign authority to keep all this clashing in check.
Now, a really crucial point to remember here is how Hobbes actually views his own work. He sees this as a strictly scientific diagnosis. He isn't acting like a priest, judging humanity for being greedy or sinful. He is deliberately exercising a value-neutral methodology. He's just describing the mechanical reality of human psychology, much like an engineer describing how an engine works. He's laying out the facts of the machine, not handing out moral condemnations.
And this scientific approach leads to a massive shift in philosophy. Back in classical philosophy, there was this big idea of a summum bonum, a permanent highest good where humans could finally rest and be at peace. Well, Hobbes completely throws that out the window. Because our desires are constantly shifting, he argues there's simply no ultimate finish line. There are only those shifting desires and our constant, exhausting effort to avoid the highest evil, death.
All right, let's look at the other side in Section 3, Counter-Arguments, stepping off the treadmill.
So is this incredibly cynical, restless pursuit actually an absolute truth for everyone? Let's impartially examine some other perspectives, starting with Aristotle. While Hobbes says desire is infinite and only ends when we die, Aristotle takes a completely different teleological approach. He argues that human desire is finite and goal-oriented. The ultimate goal is eudaimonia, or human flourishing. In Aristotle's view, human desire actually has a specific, attainable finish line.
We can also look at this through the lens of Eastern philosophy. Hobbes views endless desire as a hard, permanent fact of nature, something we just have to build our political systems around. But in Buddhist and Gandhian thought, this endless craving, often called Trishna, is not some permanent biological fact. It's viewed as a curable disease. It's the root of human suffering, sure, but it's something that can actively be overcome through self-discipline.
Building on that, Mahatma Gandhi focused really heavily on separating our actual needs from our greed. Through his concept of trusteeship, Gandhi argued that human motivation absolutely can transcend selfish accumulation. In this worldview, true peace and contentment are found by deliberately limiting our desires, not by endlessly hoarding power out of fear. It offers a powerful alternative where true contentment is in fact entirely possible.
And of course, we also have to consider the Marxist critique, which tackles this from an economic angle. This perspective argues that restless hoarding isn't a universal biological fact at all. Instead, they say Hobbes was merely observing the specific symptoms created by a capitalist system of production. The argument goes that if you change the economic system, you fundamentally change this supposedly permanent human nature.
Let's bring this back to today in our final section, Hobbes in the modern world.
So how deeply do Hobbes's 17th century ideas actually resonate in our society right now? Well, consider the modern economic concept of positional goods. These are products whose value comes almost entirely from the simple fact that other people do not have them. Think about a limited edition watch, or an ultra-exclusive VIP membership. This perfectly mirrors Hobbes's idea of glory. We hoard these things purely for status comparison, just to assert our relative power over others.
Honestly, modern Hobbesian realities are everywhere you look. That exhausting corporate rat race we all hear about, that is a perfect reflection of felicity, just moving restlessly from one desire to the next. We see it every day in the endless status anxiety playing out on social media. We even see it on a global scale, where nation-states engage in massive arms races, hoarding military power purely out of diffidence and the fear of an uncertain future.
Which brings us to a final question I want to leave you with. When you look at the world today, is our anxious, consumerist society ultimate proof that Hobbes was right all along about our inherently restless nature? Or do you believe we are truly capable of stepping off that treadmill to find the lasting contentment taught by thinkers like Aristotle and Gandhi? It's a profound question about who we really are. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I highly encourage you to spend some time thinking about which side of this debate you actually